be dedicated in honor of these 5 individuals and the 6th person for the road, because they gave tireless hours of their own time in many, many situations to this town, and they should be remembered and for years to come, for generations to come. So probably in another 30, 40 years, hopefully they'll be doing another one of these dedications. So we're going to start and with the one on the very end to the immediate left. And we're going to talk about Joe Rotella. And for those guys who are here tonight in honor of Joe, he meant a lot to all of us. He was the first recreation director in the town of Niagara, starting back in the 50s. I used to tell Joe when I was at banquets and he was at, I used to say, I know, you used to ride to school on your horse when you first started working there. And he was also the first athletic director in the history of Niagara Wheatfield School before it even became centralized. Bill Ross could talk to that. Joe was an inspiration to many of the youth. For some reason, he took a shining to the Belden Center bums, as we like to call ourselves back then. And many of us followed in his footsteps and went into the education field. If Joe were here today, he would be proud of how the town recreation program has come over the last 60 plus years, but he would also tell me this isn't necessary. He was that kind of guy, very humble. Joe was a World War II vet. He fought in Europe as a member of the 83rd Infantry, nicknamed the Thunderbolts, and they were instrumental in the European invasion and then the Battle of the Bulge. He began teaching at Military Road School in 1951 and moved to the new Niagara Wheatfield High School in 1959. He was the first football and basketball coach in NW history and was the first Niagara Wheatfield athletic director and key contributor in the development of the NW Athletic Conference, the old complex, in the early 60s. Joe was also, as I've mentioned, the first recreation director in the history of the town of Niagara, and he was the driving force in the establishment and overall development of our summer program, which began in 1953 and was running through the 70s when he left. Joe's impact on over 5,000 of the youth over his 22 years as director is immeasurable. He established many of the programs that were current for years and years and years, including both our summer and winter recreation programs. And he was also instrumental in establishment of the Town Niagara Recreation Committee and the development of using teachers to be playground instructors. For those of you who remember that and go back that far, and that goes back quite a ways, you remember that. He helped design many of the pocket parks we currently have, including the old baseball fields that were used for years through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s until we built this park. His idea was to stay low-key. That was the way Joe was. And unfortunately, he passed away on March 24th, 2015, at the ripe old age of 91. Joe was playing golf in his 90s up until just not too long before he passed. I know I couldn't play now, and I'm only 64. So we hereby dedicate the entrance road to Veterans Memorial Community Park as Joe Rotella Way. It will be 7,000 Joe Rotella Way on this date, August 21st, 2017. I didn't realize how big a street sign was until you see it like low. They're up on the road, you think they're not that big. Okay, our next playground park was dedicated to Rose M. Garcia. I don't know, is anyone here from Rose's family? We tried to contact them, we're not sure we could get anyone. Okay, then I'll read the bio and we'll, myself and the town board will do the unveiling. Rose was a Democratic state committee woman in the 1st Assembly District for 2 terms and was the delegate to the 1962 State Convention. And she also was invited to the inauguration of President John F. Kennedy. Rose was a charter member of the Town of Niagara Women's Democratic Club and was a 6-term president. She was chairwoman of the Town of Niagara Youth Recreation Commission and a member of St. Leo's Church, as well as Niagara Fire Company No. 1 Ladies Auxiliary, and also a resident of our town for 17 years, where she served as historian from 1953 to 1961, and was also a member of the State Historical Society. Rose passed away on May 16, 1964, unfortunately at the early age of 50. The park and playground located at Joanne Circle in the town of Niagara was dedicated to Rose Garcia on September 17th, 1966. We hereby rededicate this park playground in the memory of Rose M. Garcia on this date, August 21st, 2017. And again, I was the playground instructor at the Veterans Heights Park for a number of years. Nobody ever called it anything but the Veterans Heights Park. We didn't know any better. William Etherington, PFC Jr., was killed in action in Korea on November 18th, 1950. He was only 21 at the time of his death. William was the son of Mr. and Mrs. William G. Etherington Sr., who resided on St. Paul Street in the town of Niagara. He was a lifelong resident of the town of Niagara and attended local schools. He enlisted in the Army in July of 1948 and went overseas with the 11th Airborne Division shortly thereafter, where he was stationed in Japan prior to his transfer to Korea. I'm going to read the short bio on Mr. John Sharp, and then we'll have the families come up. PFC John Sharp, a town of Niagara resident, was killed in Guadalcanal on October 5th, 1942. We tried to do a research and did the best we could, but we could not find a lot of information on John. The park and playground are dedicated in their honor. The rededication of the park is in memory of William Etherington, and the playground in memory of John Sharp. They were originally dedicated at different times, but we will rededicate them today, August 21st, 2017, William Etherington Park and John Sharp Playground. If the families are here, please step forward. Next dedication it is a rededication, kind of, but there's never anything been officially done for John Nielsen Sr., even though we dedicated originally not too long ago. I think almost like maybe earlier this year or last year. We'll get to that date shortly. John Nielsen Sr., on January 17th, 1956, he was the chief for the Niagara No. 1 Fire Company. He answered a fire call on his way home from work and was killed fighting that fire, the only firefighter in the history of the town of Niagara to die in action. John was not only a great family man, but also devoted to his position as fire chief. And I want to read something to you that was actually in the paper on January 17th, 1956. I'm going to paraphrase it because it's a little lengthy. It's a small comfort to the family and friends of John Nielsen, chief of Niagara Fire Company No. 1, to record that he died a hero's death. Praise for his courage and his high sense of duty, greatly deserved. Does not lighten the burden of grief caused by this tragedy. No person can make a bigger sacrifice serving his community. No tribute can overdo the commendation he earned. If there is a further lesson to be learned from this sad affair, perhaps it lies in the need for better understanding of the full support we need to give to our volunteer firemen. These are our neighbors, the man next door, and our friends across the street. They work hard and long, raising funds, training, fighting fires without pay or other personal gain. John Nielsen was one of these. His enthusiasm and devotion won him the office of chief of his company. He answered that call as a matter of routine duty, and he died before the job was finished. It was a hero's death to the fullest sense. We dedicated this playground earlier this year in March of 2017, but nothing formal was done. So we hereby officially dedicate this park in memory of John Nielsen Sr. on this date, August 21st, 2017. I'd like to have the family come forward, please. Next is our dedication to Gary A. Giuliani. Gary was a longtime resident of the town of Niagara and attended local schools. He was a member of the first graduating class at Niagara Wheatfield High School in 1960. In April 1964, Gary started working with the Town of Niagara Police Department as a constable. I remember those guys. And progressed through the ranks to become chief of police in the town of Niagara, retired after 39 years of service. Gary had a passion for assisting the town's youth and coached recreational baseball. Also became the commissioner of the Town of Niagara Recreation Committee, a volunteer position he held for over 20 years. He was instrumental during his tenure as recreation commissioner with the planning of the town's first recreation center, which was the old Nevada Avenue School back in the 70s. It's not even there anymore. That's where our playground sits now. Gary was also an exempt fireman of both Niagara Active and Lewiston II, and he was married to his wife Margaret of 49 years at the time of his passing. He and Margaret raised 4 children, 3 sons, Stephen, Christopher, Gary, and 1 daughter, Beth. Gary passed away at the age of 74 after a long battle with ALS. The park and playground located at the end of Colonial Drive was dedicated in Gary's honor and memory last October 2016, but as with the Nielsen Park, we really didn't have time to do anything proper, so we're doing it here today. So we hereby rededicate this park in the memory of Gary A. Giuliani on this date, August 21st, 2017. Okay, we have one more, and that is to rededicate the park in Belden Center, which was the John Watowitz Park, and we are going to rededicate that in John's memory. John was a dedicated employee of the town of Niagara for over 40 years, and under the direction of Joe Rotella, worked tirelessly improving and constructing most of the parks and playgrounds and ball fields that the town used through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. If ever we needed somebody, John was there. He would borrow a piece of the equipment from the town. Couldn't do those kinds of things today. He was one of those guys you could always count on in a pinch, and on many occasions worked in his own time to manicure the ball fields at each park so that each and every town of Niagara youngster had a ball field of their own in their own backyard. The park playground in Belden Center, which is the site of the former Nevada Avenue School, was dedicated in John's honor in December of 1988. We would hereby like to rededicate that park in memory of John on this date, August 21st, 2017. I'd like to have his family come forward. Does anybody notice a common trend here? Belden Center? No, I didn't. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Hi, I'm Cindy Abbott-Letro. Behind the camera, we'll talk today to Greg Lamberson, who has been talking to production assistants about what that job entails. But Greg is someone that has made films and written books and done just about everything there is to do, I think, in how to make a film. Tell me a little bit about, how you got into what you do, because you are really a professional production assistant, among other things.
I consider that the least of my my resume slots, but I'm from the area. I grew up in Dunkirk, Fredonia. I grew up loving monsters, and that led to horror films, but science fiction films, all types of films. I moved to New York City in 1982 to go to film school. I went for a year, and then at the time there were a lot of midnight movies playing around New York City, and a lot of sort of amateur productions that were getting theatrical releases, the types of films I wanted to do. So I didn't go back to film school for another year, and I started working on that type of film for free, and 2 years later made my first film.
You really wanted to do this if you were doing it for free.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I've been doing it for over 30 years, and there have been long, long dry spells. And I have a family, and it's not easy, but this is what I'm here to do, and I'm not giving up.
Well, I would like to get your impression about what's been happening in this region, because we had a whole, studio full of 60 kids that all want to get into films. They want to be production assistants. I mean, what kinds of things can they expect? And is there work for them here?
Well, it's much better than it was. I made my fourth film, which was my first film in Buffalo in 2009, and things were not in place yet. There was no infrastructure, but there were pockets of people doing different types of professional work. And I saw then that there was the interest. And I will tell you that since 2009, I've really had two dreams. One is to make my living doing my own films, but another is to build a film industry here. And fortunately, there are other people in the area who have that same dream. Now, often we work together on projects, like when films come out of town, we hire on them. But there is a dedicated group of people here who want to see films being produced here. And this just happened to coincide with the technological advance of digital filmmaking, which makes films more inexpensive, but also it makes it possible for local filmmakers to do their own work. And it coincides with the tax credit that we've heard so much about, the production tax credit, which is bringing film work to town. And it has exploded since 2009. The one drawback is that because of our area, typically it's a seasonal business. September and fall are when people want to shoot, except for when Fred Olen Ray comes to town to do a Christmas
That's
movie.
Right.
The winter films are few and far between. So the people who make their living doing crew work, if they want to make their living year-round, they often have to travel during the off-season. And
But
that's
you've
just part
been
of the job.
you have been very lucky, and I don't want to demean or whatever, but to be a production assistant. But that is such a key, it's a key entry level position, but it's also so critical to a film.
It is, and it's how people learn the nuts and bolts of working on a set. You have to start somewhere, and they're essential. And when a film comes to town, very often they bring their keys, the key department heads, with them. They're people that the filmmakers have worked with, so they don't want to hire local people for the key positions. They want to hire them for the assistant positions, sometimes in those departments, and they want to hire them to be production assistants, just like extras. That's where the local people can come in, and that's how you gain your entry. That's how you meet like-minded people and people who can hire you on other shows. I do my own films, but I often also work as what's called a line producer or a production manager or a first assistant director on films that come to town. And then I'm in a position to recommend people for some of these positions. So networking really is key. And frankly, everyone who holds a department head position knows the local people they want to work with and try to bring them onto the show with them.
It seems as if we're getting a lot of sort of return business. What is
Yes.
it that's happening here? I mean, we can, and I hope continues to happen, that is bringing people back.
My first big show in this town was working for Chris Olen Ray, Fred Olen Ray's son. I know you interviewed both of them. Chris hired me on to be an assistant director. They came to this town specifically because they wanted to shoot in an airport. They found an available location at the Niagara airport,
Right.
which Tim and Rich helped them get. When they were here, Chris saw so much architecture in this area that he recommended it to his father, Fred, who's in a staff. Chris is a producer, Fred is a producer and a director. Fred's directed some 60 films. Fred has now gotten to the point where Fred comes to town, while he's shooting a film, he's location scouting for the next script he's going to
Right,
write. He is writing scripts tailored for the Western New York area, whether they're set in Buffalo or not. Sometimes we substitute for other cities, which is fine. But people come here and they see we're the 20-minute city. You can get from an urban area to a rural area in 20 minutes. There is a decent crew base. When I was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came, and on that one I was just doing crowd control. I was up on the 33 asking people politely to step back. The production people could not believe the number of people working as production assistants who had directed their own feature films. I mean, there were like 6 or 8 of us. So, I mean, the interest is here, the passion's here, and now the experience is coming.
What would you, if you were going to give advice to those people that are in power to make this a a true film industry working in Buffalo? What do you think is the key thing that we need to do?
Well, I will tell you that our film commission, which is Tim Clark and Rich Wall, and Mayor Brown, and I assume the town supervisors around.
Right,
I mean, I don't know all of them by name.
Our
but
county executive, and I think up in Niagara Falls gives some money too.
they have been doing an extraordinary job welcoming films to come to town, and they don't charge for permits like a lot of cities do. I mean, that's usually the first thing that surprises people when they come to town. Oh, I don't have to allocate $8,000 for these permits. They are welcoming and friendly to these outside productions. I mean, they're doing what they can. I think we'd all like to see more resources devoted to them. I think a two-man team of Rich and Tim are doing an extraordinary job, but they are understaffed. They need some help. It's time for them to have a little team of people who can help them, because there's so many films coming to town.
Well, I noticed what you said too about the fact that for people that want to be involved in this is not a 9-to-5 job.
No, it's not.
It's crazy. Usually, like Ninja Turtles, that was when everybody else is at home. That's when they were shooting.
Yeah, we shot at night on Ninja Turtles, and that's a union show, so they were pretty strict on it being a 12-hour day, I think. Sometimes days can be 14 hours or 15 hours. And we would spend a couple of hours just sitting in the tent waiting to be up, but then we would spend the next 10 hours standing on pavement, and that is brutal on your feet, standing on pavement all day for 10 days.
But your aspirations. You talked about being a production assistant, but you have made your own films. What do you see? What would you like to do personally that would be the hallmark for you?
Well, I spent a lot of my career making micro-budget films that cost anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. Last year, I finally made my first big film, which was $250,000, which enabled me to hire a 30-man crew. And when you're begging people for favors to help you out on weekends or late at night, to do the best they can, they got to feed their families too. It's nice when you finally reach the point where you can pay them an actual rate and bring them on. And my shoot went well, and everyone had a great time. And I know all those people that I have spent years working with on other shows and asking for favors, I was really able to put together the top team that I wanted, and I can't wait to do something else with them. I'd like to be able to make a film every year. I mean,
That's great. That's great. We're lucky to have you here. We're lucky that you gave your time to talk to all these kids and tell them the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful about being a production assistant.
I think it's very important not to paint everything with roses, and let people know you got to be ready for those blisters and those long hours, and to be standing outside in the rain, to know what to expect going in.
You're proof of it. Thank you for talking with
Thank
me.
you.
And we'll see you next time on Behind the Camera.
Are we ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, begin! And, we've got some cutting their pierogi with forks. Karen's gone right to using her hands. Karen's using her hands, which could be an interesting strategy, right, Myron?
Wow, she's double fisting. That's incredible. I've never seen anybody do that. Just keep going, keep going. Make sure you get some sips of water in between and get it to go down. It's coming up, it's going to be down to the water. He's got it, it's going, it's coming. It's almost in front, Ronnie. A little bit of water. Help it go down.
3 minutes! 3 minutes!
Tom Puckett has adopted to bypass using the fork. He has gone to hands as well. Tom Puckett is almost finished with number 4. It's coming.
Put the fork down, use your hands!
This is important here because you gotta get to work here. Tom's gonna show you what.
1 minute.
1 minute left to go as of right now. 60 seconds. John Zach is over. John Zach is just dead in time on his pierogi. That was an act of kindness, I believe. 15 seconds.
Count them down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Tom Puckett.
Everybody, step back. All right, well, everybody, it looks like Tom Puckett is our winner. Stand up, Tom. inaugural Polka Fest pierogi eating competition.
But now take down your fishing pole and meet me at the fishing hole. We may not get a bite all day, but don't you rush away. What a great place to rest your bones, and mighty fine for skipping stones. You'll feel fresh as a lemonade for sitting in the shade. Whether it's hot, whether it's cool, oh, what a spot for whistling like a fool. What a fine day to take a stroll and wander by the fishing hole. Well, I can't think of a better way to pass the time of day. We'll have no need to call the roll when we get to the fishing hole. There'll be you, me, and old dog Trey to doodle time away. Man, it's so nice out here. I wouldn't care if I was fishing with a naked hook.
Well, old buddy, you might as well be fishing with a naked hook. No more fishing you've caught.
Oh, you reckon you're ever gonna catch one?
Caught more than you have. No fishing rascal.
I ain't gonna have to take your fish off for you, am I, today, you know?
That's the only way you're gonna get fish smell on your hand.
Pass me one of them cold ones, would you? Hanging around, taking our ease, watching that hound scratching at his fleas. If we don't hook a perch or bass, we'll cool our toes in dewy grass, or else pull up a weed to chaw and maybe sit and jaw. Come on, take down your fishing pole and meet me at the fishing hole. I can't think of a better way to pass the time of day. Come on, take down your fishing pole and meet me at the fishing hole. I can't think of a better way to pass the time of day.
We're happy to do it this year. The kids are happy, and hopefully another year in the books. So we're doing well. There's been some quite big fish being caught out there.
Hole, I can't think of a better way to pass the time of day.